Joomla 1.6. Joomla 1.6 for developers. Brought to you by the following sponsors. Thanks, guys. Rockin', the official web host of Joomla. Jetla, the Joomla enterprise layer. CMS Association, host of the CMS Expo, helping you connect to the CMS community. Business Geeks, make the most of your technology. And Studio Solutions, advertising, web and video. And now for our host, the Master Chef of Joomla, Mr. Andrew Eddy.
This session is going to be pretty heavy on the developer side, and we're going to be looking at some of the changes that are in 1.6 that are of particular interest to developers. There are a lot of new things available, a lot of new toys, a lot of changes that are going to make your life a lot easier in terms of developing extensions. But there are also changes that you're going to be aware of that need to be done to enable things to work with 1.6 as well. As I've mentioned quite a number of times that there are the minimum specifications for Joomla 1.6 have risen. It's now a minimum of PHP 5.2.4. It's a minimum of MySQL 5.0.4. The reason for that one was to allow for wide varchars in the database. A varchar is no longer limited to 256 characters. As of that version of MySQL, you can have up to 64K for any one row in the database. It doesn't mean you need to be careful. Realistically, you can have one wide varchar of about 20K in a table row. So we've used that to effect, rather than using text fields, which actually get the information isn't contained in the same row that comes back from the database. So sometimes it's a little bit more efficient. When you need something more than 256 characters, but something a lot less than 64K. Browser support, we've dropped IE6 like many other people in the world, and I'm sure Microsoft would like more people to drop it. But for the administrator and for the front end, we will officially only be supporting IE7+, Firefox 3+, and Safari 4+. As I said in an earlier session, this doesn't mean that you can't design administrator templates or front-end templates to work with IE6. It's just that the core project won't be supporting that, and those businesses that are still locked into IE6 will have to do their own work to make 1.6 compatible with IE6. The big focus on for 1.6 has been a big push to get our code consistent. In 1.5, it would have been very difficult to discern which is the Joomla way. We had up to 4 different ways of doing components, different ways of handling back-end components, different ways of handling front-end issues. And it's very difficult for people to learn by example. So there's been a big push for making things consistent, rational, logical. And so now you'll find almost all of the back-end components, very similar structure, very similar design. All of the front-end components, very similar structure, very similar design. So that it's now a matter of following by example actually means something. If you're doing what's in the core, then you're on a good way of learning the Joomla way, whatever that really means. We've also tried to reduce repetitive code a lot and introduced a lot of classes and code particularly into the MVC to cut down on the create, replace, update, delete operations that happen in almost every component, so that you're not redoing that all of the time. We've also tried to use PHP native methods, functions, API, wherever possible. Things like JSimpleXML, now we've dropped that. We're rather using a class that extends PHP's native SimpleXML and gives us all of the benefits of that. JDate extends the JTime class, so we're going to get over a lot of time zone issues, and support for JDate can now, it'll support modification of dates and things like that. It makes that a much more robust class. And particularly with languages, we've swapped to the native ini parser, which is a heck of a lot faster than our old version. The downside of that is it's also a lot more picky than our old version, and your files will need to be stricter. I'll go into that in a little bit further. Quite a few things in 1.5 were marked for removal, marked as deprecated. So if something is marked as deprecated in a particular version, it will be removed in the next version. And likewise, we have deprecated marked features, marked code as deprecated in 1.6, which will get removed in 1.7. The things that are removed in 1.6, there was some ADODB compatibility functions in the database classes. They've gone. DOMIT, the XML parser, is gone. We've gone to the native PHP support, and DOMIT was no longer supported as a community project anyway. Very importantly, legacy mode goes with all of its associated benefits. The global dollar mainframe goes, a global dollar option, all of those sort of things disappear. So one of the things that you should be doing to test for 1.6 is turn legacy mode off for a start, but there's also a few other things that, like dollar mainframe, that need to be sorted out. Just on that, if your extensions do require legacy mode now, you have no chance of running on 1.6. You need to bring those extensions up to standard, at least up to 1.5 standard, and you will have the least amount of work to make them compatible with 1.6. There is a little bit, and I'll be going into what those are. JTemplate and PatTemplate. PatTemplate's a wonderful engine. It was just too inefficient, too slow, and we've dropped that. We're using our own JView. Has proven itself to be quite flexible, and it's sort of based on the PHP Savant theme. So we've dropped that template engine. PDF support is dropped in the articles. The main reason is we had nobody that was willing to maintain it, and PDF support is generally not done well in the available classes. There's a few out there, but none of them hit the mark as well as what we wanted to. We sent out a blog some time ago that we needed somebody to own this, or we drop it, but didn't have a lot of interest, so that's been dropped in 1.6. All the pair libraries have been dropped due to some licensing compatibilities. PHP GACL access control library has been completely replaced by our own homebrew. Of course, all the PHP 4 and 5 compatibility files can go because we're now in native PHP 5.2. We're also testing on PHP 5.3 to make sure that we don't get any issues there. And X-standard editor's gone because we don't have anybody to maintain that. There's a great list of deprecated features. I don't want to go into each one individually. The main ones to look at are JDate going to JDate going to the PHP native JTime. The key to look at there is the formatting. We're using datetime uses the formatting strings without the percents, and JDate in 1.5 uses the percent-based formatting. I just can't remember. One's SDRF time, and the other one's the date function as well. So you need to shift away from the percent markup to the non-percent markup. Quite a few changes in the JHTML libraries, particularly around access levels. There's a little bit of shuffling around in the list helper. Big change to Registry for those who use that. We have deprecated JParameter because it's being replaced with JForm. And we've removed the namespace support in Registry. So if you're using namespace support in there, probably a lot of you aren't. You'll need to adjust some code accordingly. We believe that Registry and JParameter are still backward compatible, but it's only until developers begin to test their own components that we'll find probably some strange idiosyncrasies. JSimpleXML has been dropped. There's now a new class called JXML, and that extends the native PHP simple. A simple XML object in PHP, and that gives you a lot of natural inbuilt. It's very fast. It's very clean. It's really a nice class to use. Having said that, we've deprecated some functions that were in JSimpleXML. Data comes to mind because any methods that aren't supported in SimpleXML we are deprecating in JXML. Oh, there we go. Yep. The JUtility class has been completely deprecated. It was just basically a collection of things that didn't fit anywhere else. Well, we've basically found a better home for them, and they all have better places to live. Okay. Okay, I'll just cover some points in various parts of the API, and then we'll have a look at the actual code. So database, there's some really interesting changes in database. There's been a lot of work done to JTable. There's a lot of derived JTable classes to help support the access control system, and also the nested sets in menus and categories, and whatever other nested set you want to support. And also a really cool class to actually start building queries programmatically. The reason we've introduced this is because people are wanting to play with other languages that aren't SQL syntax specific, like MongoDB, a range of others, even Oracle and SQL Server, Microsoft SQL Server and that sort of thing, have their own little idiosyncrasies with syntax. I mean, SQL Server, there is no limit and offset thing. You've got to go through a really weird and wonderful way of doing pagination there. The core, it's not finished, but the core is progressively being modified to use this query builder syntax, so that in future versions that people will be able to do these database agnostic versions of Joomla, or at least that's the theory. Quite a few schema changes. There's a lot of fields added and dropped and that sort of thing. I don't want to go into those in particular, but some of the things you will need to be careful of is the JOS components table has now been, that's gone. We have a unified JOS extensions table, which takes in JOS components and the plugins, also lists all of the modules, also lists all libraries, templates. So everything, JOS extensions is a catalogue of everything that is installed on the site, and it just makes things a lot easier. In 1.5 we have a blend of some things we can look up the database, some things we have to go and search for XML files. Now it's all in the database and we can just interrogate that. All of the old PHP ACL supporting folders, supporting tables are gone. They've been replaced with what is an asset table. JOS assets contains, in my last talk you would have seen the little widgets for the access controls are global at the component level, at the category level, and at the article level. Well, each of those sets of permissions is stored against an asset reference. and that's in the JOS assets table. Those permissions are actually stored as a JSON object, obviously converted to a string. But that's how that works. So the old JOS_core_ACL tables are now gone, and they've all been condensed into just 3 tables. The user groups, the view levels, and a mapping table for users to user group, which is a lot better than the 12 tables that we would have otherwise been looking at doing. So all I have to do is have a look at a JDatabase query, because it's a class that you're going to need to get to know, or will actually want to get to know. And the way we define it, we get the database object, and then we get the query from the database object. You should be familiar, GetQuery usually brought back the string representation of whatever the last query was that was set in the database. GetQuery now could bring back an object if that was what was set as the last query by setQuery. So it will bring back whatever was set, and in general what we do is set this query object. So GetQuery now takes a parameter, which is true or false, and true means get me back a new query. So we're getting a new query from the database, and the reason we get it from the database and we don't instantiate a new JDatabase query is because I said before, different database connectors will want to manipulate the database differently. So if we have a MongoDB database connector, it will bring back a variation of JDatabase query that will suit its needs, and it might do slightly different. When you add selects and froms and that, it might do slightly different things. So it's built. The queries are built programmatically, and it's got methods which are synonymous to the SQL syntax. So you can define a select, you can define from tables, you can define joins, orders and wheres. But the big difference is you don't have to do it in order. You can do it in the order that actually suits you and suits logical groups in your programming. So you can see here we're setting a select statement. Generally, we're trying to select only the information that we absolutely need for any one purpose, rather than doing select a.star or something like that. If you're bringing back in 1.5, a lot of these list views, particularly in the back end, bring back all the fields, and for example the content table, and you've got 2 text fields, and that's hundreds of, potentially a lot, tens and hundreds of K of data, bringing you back for a list view that you don't actually need. But you can see we specify a select. The beauty of this is you can do that a number of times. You don't have to have all of the select in the one call. You can call it multiple times. So you see we do a select from a base table, and here we're going to join over the languages. So we call select again. We're just adding the title here, and then we're going to do a left join on the languages. And doing it this way is a lot neater than collecting an array of joins, an array of wheres, and then doing some mishmash assembly at the end. So again, we just want to do the users. We do a select and a join, and so this select is just effectively appending the selects, appending or inserting the joins where they need to be. We've got an optional filter here, so now we've called a where clause. We're just adding a condition to the where. There's some ways of doing ors and that sort of thing. I won't go into that today, but there's the ways of specifying what the glue is for any particular where. But if you do have complicated ors and ands, it's best to just write them out in full. So we've got some sort of condition, and if the condition's true, then we put in one where clause. If it's false, then or if it's another condition, we're doing a different where clause. Again, this is all done in the order that the developer wants to deal with it, not in the order that SQL wants to deal with it. Wheres and wheres and wheres and wheres. You can define the order, you can define group, you can define a having, and various other things. So you can look at the API at your leisure. We'll generate that. We'll be generating those regularly over the time. But and then we just return the query. So where this is actually found is libraries, Joomla, database query. And you can see that the magic part about this is the magic to string function, which automatically takes all of the information you put in and assembles it into a nice clean query. And you can of course clear selective parts. You can clear just the where clause if you're doing recursive queries, and you're just changing one element. You can change just a select, or you'll clear out the whole query. It also supports a delete operation, insert your data operations, insert, replace, and delete as well. Replace? No, it doesn't do it. We don't do replace. Okay, so that's a class that encourages you to look at how the code's working, how the code is using that, and get into that format, because when the Mongo guys actually work out how to do it, then if everybody's doing it at the same standard, everybody's component extension will work on what other database connectors are around. And there are people working on, particularly a lot of work is being done in Oracle. There's a few people having a go at Microsoft SQL Server connector. We don't have, and those are currently provided to be able to connect into external data sources. Grabbing data from another database, which is a different type of database to MySQL, is much easier than actually making Joomla run on those other engines, just because of the subtleties in SQL syntax. But this is a stepping stone in the right direction to be able to do that, possibly down the track. Okay, we've had a lot of improvements to the MVC. We've added some support classes specifically to help list views, to help individual items that you're editing, and also the supporting controllers that might, the controllers that support those. So we've added things like JModel list, JModel list for list processing models, a JModel form to assist with anything to do with some sort of edit form. JModel admin is extended from JModel form with extra stuff to help in the administrator components in particular, but as people want more and more power in front end, they will also help with administrative type duties in the front end. The params field are all shifting to JSON format, not the ini format. It gives us a lot more flexibility in doing that. We've got, that should be the next thing. So in controllers, we've got complementary classes to support the models. So JController form is a controller which helps saving and editing content. JController admin assists list views with common tasks. We've got subcontroller support, much better subcontroller support, and a few other bells and whistles there. In terms of views, all of the views now have semantic semantic HTML output. Doesn't have a lot of effect on the back end because the back end wasn't too bad, but particularly the front end, and this is going to be the one big thing that's going to affect template designers, is that all of the output is now nicely formatted, heading tags and divs, and we don't have tables for structural layout and that sort of thing. So while there aren't a lot of changes in templates in design per se, as far as the PHP is concerned, all of your CSS changes, and we've made that known for quite some time. There is a set of legacy layout overrides in the Milky Way template that's going to ship with 1.6 that will try and emulate the old output from 1.5 as best we can. Obviously, we can't cope with anything that dealt with a section because they've been dropped. But that's provided as a stopgap. Fortunately, most template designers tend to override everything. The template cubs are already converting to better layout. So if you've got one of those templates, it probably won't make a lot of difference. Yeah, and okay, we'll go into that later on. So let's have a look at some of these classes. I won't look at the classes directly, but I'll look at how they're used. So we're learning the back-end content component, and each view now strictly has its own model. So for each view we have a model, and we generally also have a controller as well. So we've got in here, we've got an article, it's an articles list, edit a single article, and that's the featured view, the old front page view in back-end com content. You can see we've got a controller for each of those views, and we've also got a model for each of those views as well. So there's one, sometimes you would have seen one model trying to do too much. We just made the decision, it's easier to learn the rule. You have a model and a view and a controller for each of the, a model and a controller for each of the views. The only exception would be a list view that doesn't actually have any actions performed on it, like an action on the list view is publish a full set of things. So if we look at the articles model, this is derived from JModelList, and JModelList has a lot of helper methods to deal with the list query and that sort of thing, but there's a few there that you need to override. Now, one of the difficulties with MVC is working out how you inject state into the model the right way, and the way we've chosen to do it is have a method called populate state, which is called very early on in the model. And this is the area where information is got from the request. Another way to do it would be to have the controller inject information into the model, but then you sort of have to deal with a big switch statement, which then doesn't mean you can just add extra views and things like that. But this is the way it's happened. So populate state gets called the first time JModel GetState is called. And basically what we do is we get state from the request, or we get new state from the request, or we look at state that's been stored. So in 1.5 you'll be familiar with if you're on page 2 of a list, when you go somewhere else and you come back, you're still in page 2. That's what's happening here with this get user state from request. Everyone should be familiar with this. JModelList has an internal context, and we've just got to add a base context, and we've just got to add what the actual variable is there. We set that, and then all we do is call the parent populate state to deal with the list handling, because JModelList is probably pretty good chance we're going to be dealing with a page offset and a list length and an ordering and a direction. So all we have to do is, the only thing that we don't really know about is what's the default ordering and what's the default ordering direction. So we pass that back up to the parent, and it just takes care of all of those list offsets and things like that. So we can have a look at the article manager. Oops. And so this is storing, all of the pagination and order information. There's also a method that you need to override to get the unique ID, and this is used for caching. You've just got to tell it what custom information do we have to add, and basically all you're doing is replicating. We've got to add what the search term was, what the access was, published, category ID, and language. All we're doing is adding that to the store ID, and then we pass that back to the parent, and the parent handles all of that pagination information for you. It's all very nice and clean way of doing that. And then the only other method we need to define is please get me the query that gets me the information for the list. It's a protected function called GetLessQuery, and we just saw how this sort of works. We grab the database object, we grab a new query object from the database, and then we just define based on what's in the model state. You can see we've got filter.search. We've set, so when we get a request from the, when we get a variable state from the request, we then inject that state into the model, filter.search, and filter.search will turn up down here. If search was active, if there was something in the search, in first talk today I talked about the ID alias. We're also allowing to search for a particular author. Otherwise we just do a search for a string in there, and that's how that works. All GetLessQuery has to do is deal with the select, deal with the from, deal with any wheres, deal with the order, and then it returns the query. And JModelList handles converting those to strings and inserting into the database. So for list views, it makes it really nice and clean. All you have to worry about is the information that you need. Most list views, because we've unified a lot of the methods, have some sort of change of state. So they have a publish and generally some sort of trash or delete operation. And because these don't happen from an individual item, they always happen from a list view. Like when you go and edit an item, you don't have a delete button. We used to have that. We don't anymore. So we handle those sort of operations from a list controller, and that derives from JController admin. And generally, all you have to define in here is which is the default model that you're getting. And in this case, it's the article model with a prefix of content model. And generally, that's all you need to define. However, in content, we have an extra function called featured. Oh, featured. Featured, we click on there, or click on toggle there. So that action is actually going through this list subcontroller. Actually, I should back up a bit. If we look at the main dispatcher or the main component file, it's really simplified now. So we've got the access check, and you'll remember from access control talk, we talked about this manage function that allowed access to all of the components in the back end. Well, this is where we're checking the actual programmatic name of all of those permissions is core.something, and in this case it's core.manage. So we're just doing the access check for the component, importing the component controller. Then we just, JController getInstance is a new method to get an instance of the content controller. And what it will do is it will automatically look for either the main controller or the subcontroller, depending on what the task is, the format of the task in the URL, execute and redirect. And almost every component will be that simple. That's all that there is in the main dispatcher file. So how that works is, if we have a look at this fella, so the featured one, what we're doing in featured is sending a task called articles.unfeatured. If we just said the task was unfeatured, then it's going to look in the default, the master controller, the controller.php in the root of the components directory. If we say articles.unfeatured, we're looking in a subcontroller. So this is your master controller, which is essentially just concerned with displaying the view. The right one, content. Yep. And here is subcontroller. So we're looking at because the format was articles dot, this is the subcontroller, so we're looking at subcontroller articles. Naming conventions are very important. So subcontrollers need to be made the name of the component, or really this has to be the name of the master controller, which should be the name of the component, which is the name of the component's folder less the com underscore prefix. And it has to be the same name as the file it's in. So articles.php, this needs to be the articles, content controller articles. You generally don't need a constructor unless you're registering a new task. So we get the parent to deal with whatever it needs to deal with, and the parent automatically registers published and delete and that sort of thing, trash, archive. But in this case, in content, we've got a featured method, and we just have to alias unfeatured to featured. We deal with what happens in that and let it go. And then it does whatever it needs to. If we look in something like web links, the web links controller is as simple as that. So to do very simple list views, you haven't got a lot of code in here. So that's the list controller. This is the list model. Populate the state out of the request, get the unique ID for any cache, internal caching that we're doing, set up the conditions for the query, and that code supports all of that, which is pretty cool, I think. Okay, so similarly, we have, we might have a look at the view. So a list type view would typically look like this. Again, it's very clean. There's not a lot to it. We just define the variables that are going to be used in the layout. Because we're in PHP 5 land, we don't need assign ref anymore. All objects in PHP 5 are dealt with by reference anyway. So that's actually good, and it can be bad, because you have to think about cloning if you're wanting to deal with copies of objects and that sort of thing. So something to keep in mind. But yeah, the old 1.5 assign ref we don't need anymore. We just assign the model methods to the variables directly. Now, when the model calls, when each of these model methods is called, each of those will set an internal error if something's gone wrong, And what we do is we just let all of those happen, and then we check if any errors were encountered in the model. If there was, then we just raise the error. If not, we add the toolbar, and then we just defer to parent, the display method in the parent. Add toolbar is a bit more daunting than previously, because we need to adjust the toolbar for what people can do. The way we've done it, we have a helper that brings back the actions that a particular user is allowed to do. We set the title, and then we just interrogate, can an author create, can they edit, can they change the state, and if they can change the state, just double checking that if we're not in the trashed view, we can only trash. If we're in the trashed view, we need to empty the trash, that sort of thing. Here's this core.manage permission to, it's web, that's that check-in one, that's a new one I'd missed. Core.admin for preferences is the helper for this options thing here. Okay. So lists are all really nice and clean. What we do for an individual item itself, where are we? Close these up. Item controller, item model, item view, item layout, controller. Okay, so for an item in the edit case, which for all intents and purposes mostly only happens in the back end, there's a little bit on the front end, and you basically follow these sorts of principles. We derive from JController form, and JController form takes care of add, edit, and save, basically. And the only thing that you need to assist with is if you have special permissions to allow somebody to add something and allow somebody to edit something. And so we've provided protected methods in JController form for allow add. There's a default state, which is pretty ordinary. But in this case, because we're in web links. Web links supports category level permissions. So we just have to check whether this category has been defined to allow this person to create. So we're looking at the core.create permission. And similarly for allowing people to edit, we're interrogating the core.edit permission in the web links category. If there is no category defined, then we just default back to the component level setting. And generally, again, that's all the code that you will have in a typical component. If it doesn't support categories, you might have an empty class, which is pretty good. So that's the controller. In the models, the model for an individual item we derive from JModelAdmin, and again, it knows what to do generally knows what to do about saves, it knows what to do about edits, and a lot of internal handling there. You just have to tell it, are there any special rules that will allow me to delete this thing? Any special rules that will allow me, that I need to know about to change the state? And for this one, again, we go to the category level. In articles, we actually go to the article level itself. We need to tell it which table that we're dealing with. We need to give the model some instructions on how to load the form via the JForm API. I'll go into that soon. We need to give it some instruction on how to load the form data, because the form will generally preload the data for the model. We need to give it some instruction on, we may need to give it some instruction on how to get the item. If there's nothing special that has to happen to the item, then the parent get item is okay. In this case, we're just converting that JSON metadata field to a registry object. It automatically handles params fields. So if you get a params fields, it will deal with that. There's also a method called prepare table, and what this does is makes any changes to the table before it's saved. I've seen some developers do this in the check method. Check's not really a place to be manipulating data, like changing dates to GMT or a UTC, changing the alias to some more suitable value. What we've tended to do is move all of that data preparation into this prepare table, and that's called by the parent at an appropriate location. There's another method there to support the, we can go one there. These reorderings, I don't think that's probably the case. Yeah, so when you're in ordering mode, you can order these things up and down. Get reorder conditions is a method to, for example, when you're dealing with a category-based content, you only want to order within the category that content is in. So that's just another method. So a lot of the base work is all done for you, and we've just got little hooks in there to allow you to change the flavour based on the content you have. We can have a look at the article subcontroller. Article subcontroller is pretty benign. It just we're looking at the model. So that's the article subcontroller. Allow add, allow edit. That's all we need to do. Generally, that's all you will ever need to do. The article model. Again, we've got these, can I delete it, can we edit it, prepare the table, we've incremented the version, that's all we need to do to prepare it. Probably not everything's refactored as well as it could be. That probably should include some of the date handling, alias handling. Get the item, we've got in the content table, params is called attribs. My fault, sorry. But that's from the Mambo days. So we need to deal with the attribs field by hand and the metadata field by hand. And we also do something with the article text. Interesting. We get the form, we load custom form data. These get form and load form data become very important with the JForm class and allow it to override certain things. So as you dig into this sort of code, it'll become more obvious. A little bit of custom save work in the article model because of the, if we change the featured setting, we need to change a different table. So we're just calling an internal method called featured. That probably should be protected. And we do some work in there. Again, get reorder conditions. Articles are category based, so we only want to reorder within the categories. Again, nice and simple. It's probably a little further we could have gone, but ultimately you're only dealing with the code which is specific to this particular piece of content. Okay. Get myself organised. We've really expanded, you've seen in my other talks this options thing. That was introduced in 1.5 as a way that developers could sort of get an easy way to support custom options. But you're only limited to one tab, and after a while, a very long list of options starts to get a little bit crazy. So we've introduced tab support to this. And again, this is only possible through the use of JForm, which I'll cover in a moment. So out of the box, you'll be able to support this without rolling your own configuration view. And the way that we do this is via a config.xml file in the root of the component. And this is starting to look at JForm XML format. JForm is basically JParameter on steroids. JParameter was brilliant in its day for being able to generate a form to give you options, but the form itself had no intelligence. It had no way of knowing how to filter itself, didn't have any idea. It knew how to display data, but it didn't know how to accept data. Well, JForm takes JParameter, gives it extra display characteristics, but also makes it aware of the inherent type of data that it's dealing with. And so what you'll see is generally where we had a params tag, that will be now a fields tag. Where we had a field tag, or where we had a param tag, that now becomes a field tag. But on top of that, we also have a field set. And it's the field sets that creates these multiple tags. What we can look at in this configuration land is we've got an articles tab, blog layouts, list layouts, category and featured, integration, text filters, and permissions. And generally a few of these are related to how the defaults for particular views. So we've got a few tabs there. So how they're all built by field sets. So each of those is a field set, and we have fields within a field set. Now the type is generally what was a JParameter type is now a field type. There are a couple of name changes around, but generally we've got it right. Developers, the params tags won't have any meaning anymore in 1.6. So you can leave them in there, they won't hurt anything, but they won't actually do anything either. So you will need to add these fields and field sets in the configuration file and in the model files. I'll go back to the model file. And you'll just have to watch the type. In a lot of cases, the change has been we've used we've fixed up some pluralization where a field might have been access levels, and it's only selecting one level. It'll be changed to access level, that sort of thing. Just something you'll have to look at. You'll soon find out. It just won't display. So this is one area of change. So you can see, or we can see in our browser, we've got the articles field set, the blog default, list defaults, categories, integration, filters. These are all field sets, and then we've got a number of fields in the field set, and it just handles that automatically for you. I'll just jump quickly back to the edit form. I should have done this before. So all of this information here, the main information, your main details, title, alias, category, that sort of thing. And all of your options are now controlled by a single XML form. So basically, it's a big JParameter XML, except it's got a lot more information in it. So we start off with a form tag. And in here we have field sets and fields groups. This one's not particularly necessary, but we just decided to do this way. So we've got the main fields in this particular field set. So we've got the ID, we've got an asset ID, which I'll talk about a little bit more when we look at the access controls, the title, the alias, article text, all of the usual suspects. And what happens with them in the view is the really cool thing is you don't have to worry about what the actual HTML for those is. All you do is call the form that has been injected in the view, get the label for the field name, get the input for the field name. That's it. do that for each one of those. You could probably get really smart and actually give the main field set a name and do that all programmatically. We haven't done that in the core layouts for the main fields that actually relate to database fields because we wanted to display them in particular orders or wrap them in particular HTML or put them in different places. But there's nothing stopping you from making that even easier and just putting that in a loop. More real fields. Then we get to a block of code. That's the block of code that is supporting the old parameters or the attributes field in content, and it's got a little. It needs to be handled with a little bit of care. So what we do in here is when we have a JSON field or the old ini field, we actually, the way of handling that is to call it, give it a fields tag with a name. And JForm automatically knows that, oh, okay, I'm actually dealing with one object here, and it's like an array. This is effectively saying this is an array of data. And, but when we get into there, it's just the same as for the configuration. We define a field set, and we define fields within that field set. So here we've got this show title happening in the basic field set. Joomla is aware of basic and advanced. It'll automatically get the naming for that. But you can put as many, how in 1.5 you've got advanced and basic, particularly in modules and templates, or not templates, templates, plugins. Well, now you can have as many of these sliders as you want. It gets a little bit freaky when you put too many, and I think there's places where we do have too many, but sky's the limit. So what you can see now is, well, we've got the show title there, and that relates to that. And this is, article options. Okay, so we've only got the one field set in here, just a basic set of parameters. Again, it's very similar to JParameter. You just got to shift yourself into JForm when you're dealing with forms and fields and field tags, with the addition of the field set tag to create these groupings. Okay. Title. Where JForm comes into its own is things like this. We can set an attribute to required equals true, and at the interface level, that will apply some logic there. So this field is actually required. There's a little star there added, and that sort of thing. So at this level, there is some logic. There's some awareness about what fields are required and what aren't. But also when it saves, there is some awareness that this field, again, the form, that XML is loaded when we're saving things, and it will go through and check what's required. We have things like what's required. We have filters. So filters actually process the information. So the article text is run through safe HTML. We have other filters like converting user-supplied dates to UTC or GMT, whichever one you prefer. Filters of raw. By default, everything will be not heavily filtered. So you'll have HTML stripped out, JavaScript stripped out, and you have to explicitly untighten those rules. So obviously an article text, safe HTML is a bit lighter. Raw is lighter again. You can use a PHP function as a filter. So you can define very early on your controller, you can add a custom function to filter particular information. There's also, don't have an example, I can't think of one just at the moment, but you can do things like email addresses, and it'll validate email addresses as well, booleans and that sort of stuff. I simply can't go into all of the stuff we've got in here in the time that we've got. I'll come back to it if we can. So that's really it. All of you don't have to worry about the HTML side of rendering fields anymore. It's as long as you're deriving from these MVC classes and you do your XML right, it all just works. It works quite well. Means that a lot of safety checks you don't have to worry about. A lot of sanity checks you don't have to worry about. And if we find a bug in the core things, then obviously in the next release it's fixed up for you as well. Okay, so that's a bit on. I'll just check. Yeah, that's most of the goodies in the MVC. There's a few changes front-end wise with respect to front-end layouts and views. Back-end, most of the back-end supports layout overrides now, so I expect to see lots of fantastic admin templates coming out. You would have seen before the Hathor template uses extensive use of layout overrides to get that accessibility happening. Joomla praise, admin praise had the stainless template, which is a stunning looking admin template. Too bad if you've got a standard Joomla book there. It doesn't look the same. Another guy, can't remember his name, but I think it's Andy, has done a real GUI sort of desktop-y feel thing. We'll see how those go, but I expect to see some more wonderful things happen with the administrator. Probably not so much the individual components, but some of the surrounding supporting elements. Anyway, the menus. In 1.5, so again, this is all JForm happening, and menus, modules, and plugins do some pretty funky stuff now with JForm. If we look at a view, components, content, views, featured, template. Okay, so this is the layout. Formatting's not real good. But this is the layout XML. What do we got? Okay, so there's some, there's a few little tricks to getting parameters to work in templates, modules, and layouts. It has to start in this format. Has to start with the fields of name equals params, and has to then include a named field set for each, oops, you can go away. For each panel you need a named field set. And the beauty of this is, if I've got time I'll mention this later, there are plugins which allow you to inject more things into this on the fly. But that's it, as long as you've got that, you've then defined your fields for each panel. So you can see we've got max level here. We're in the featured view. That must be max level. Let's see. Show empty categories. Maybe I'm not looking at the right place, or that's... Oh, okay, show empty. Not displaying for some reason. Maybe... Oh no, list. Okay. Well, we'll have to go to show empty categories. I don't know why that one's not displaying. That'll probably come to me in a minute. So there, we're defining a field, show empty categories, show description, show empty categories. Oh, there it is there. What's that doing there? Oh, don't mind me. It's late in the day. Subcategory levels, so that was show empty categories. So we can see, you know, the normal deal. We've got all of the options, none, J1 to 5. This is... Okay, so what we're actually doing there is giving them a translated sort of version of actual numbers. I guess that's because the translation team has decided that some people might want to display numbers slightly differently. So there you go. So we've got a field set for the advanced parameters, field set for the article parameters, field set for the integration parameters, or options as we're calling them. So advanced, article, integration. And with plugins you can add stuff to these, you can take stuff away from any of these. I'd be a bit careful about taking stuff away. And you can add extra field sets as well. But as you can see, you're not limited to just the old basic and advanced anymore. You can have things that are much more contextual, much more tuned, and you don't have to use spaces everywhere to try and group things that are really changing, like these integration options. To do that before, you'd have to have that as a thing between two spaces, and there's a very long list of things. Yep. So that's that for there. Might have a look at very similar thing for modules. Oops. In modules, we need to start with the config tab. That's our key to say these are the parameters. And again, we have, all you need to remember is this fields, name equals params, and then you do the field set for each thing. So we've got a basic set and we've got an advanced set. And in modules, you can have as many panes as you want. Same goes for plugins, same goes for templates. Anything more on JForm? No. Okay. So I've covered that. Okay. So what the form library does, what have I done in there? Libraries, actually we're looking here, application, component, model form. GetForm is abstracted and it generally does a call to load form. So what we're doing is instantiating a form object itself. This is just to get an appreciation for how the manipulation can work. Each form has must have a unique name so that a third-party developer has a chance of modifying the form that he needs to. We then have a switch for loading the form data, pre-processing the form, and then we bind the data. What load form data does, Load form, yeah, okay. Load form data is generally defined in the model itself, but pre-process form, what it does is fire, the important thing here is it fires an event called onContent prepare form. And that allows, it passes the form and the expected data, the data that the form is dealing with, to the plugin, and that plugin is then allowed to manipulate the form. Yeah, I don't really have time to go into the API. I'll show you that quickly though. We're in form. Generally, you'll use things like form load and turn replace off, and you'll be able to graph stuff in, or you'll be able to overwrite stuff and do a whole heap of things. So you'll have your own little subforms that you can suck in. A good example of where this is happening is the user profile plugin that ships with, that we're shipping. It doesn't profess to be the be-all and end-all of plugins, but it's more an example of how you would do it. Now this operates on users. There's a set of triggers for manipulating user forms. Oh no, they're all the same. So for forms, this is the same. So we've got the user profile thing. We've got the onContent prepare form. We just make sure that it's a form. We make sure that it's a form that we want to know about. And then all we do is inject basically some custom fields into that fella. And we can set fields or remove fields or do whatever we want. So at your leisure, I'd encourage you to have a look at that. There's also another trigger on content prepare data. So this is the hook. You've got a hook to manipulate the form, and you've also got a hook to manipulate the data itself. So, and basically all this does is gets data from an external data source. And you can see we're just looking up a profile table here. And then, so that's so prepare the form, so prepare the fields, prepare the data that's going to be dealt with, and then you'll just use an on-after save event to actually capture that data. But I commend you to sort of just have a look at that, how that's working, and then find all of the bugs in the forms that we've missed. No doubt there's a few there. So that's that. Yeah, so on content prepare form, on content prepare data, on content prepare form data are the main things there, and your XML. But if you're not worried about manipulating forms, you never really have to touch the form API. Okay, translation support, a lot of advances in translation support. As I've said, we've got the Unicode slugs. The slug is a term that we use for the Ceph URL, search engine friendly, human readable URL. Now supports that sort of Greek or Cyrillic or whatever in there. Three-letter language codes now supported, the XXX-XX format. All of the language keys have been refactored to suit both in file format. Your ini files need to be strict format. I'll go into that. Yeah. So what that means is they always have been, all keys must be uppercase, but now they can contain no spaces or punctuation, alphanumerics and underscores only. They've all got to be double quoted, double quote, start and the end. But if you use double quotes in the middle of it, we've got to use this sort of strange format. And the reason we've got to do this is because of a difference in behaviour in PHP 5.2 and 5.3. It's a really cool way of doing this in 5.3 that doesn't work in 5.2. So we've got a constant defined, underscore QQ underscore. And how this works is double quoted bits of the value are concatenated with the bits in between. So what this is effectively saying is concatenate that with the constant, and then concatenate the literal string, and then concatenate the constant, and then concatenate the literal string. So in PHP it would actually sort of look something like that, a dotted syntax. But in here, the dot is implied. It's just the way it works. So it looks a bit strange, but that's the only reliable way that we've found that it can work on both PHP 5.2 and 5.3. If your extension relies on any core keys that are in 1.5, I don't think any old keys are going to exist in 1.6, so you're going to have to rework those. There are a lot of global any keys to take advantage of, and you'll find those in language NGB, the main ini, and you can see this is great. For all of your common stuff, archived allow, a lot of common terms are in there, prefixed with a J. Everything's prefixed with a J if it's a core term. Great heap of things. If you're using the core JModel forms and all of the MVC stuff, a lot of these sort of strings are automatically handled for you. But it's just something to be aware of. If you're using core strings, 99.9% sure they won't be available in 1.6. There is a JavaScript translation layer as well, and I just go to have a look at the Flash uploader for that. It's got a good example of how that's done. So incidentally, the Flash uploader now works because we've upgraded to MooTools 1.2. We may also go to 1.3 if we're confident that it's ready enough. Now, a really cool thing is language files can now be included in your component or in your extension folder rather than having to copy them to the core. We're actually encouraging developers to use local language files now and leave the core as this is what ships with the core and this is what somebody would have to build for a core language pack for the standard distribution. But you guys should be using local language files, and even if your work is just in English, I really recommend you use language files. And how that will look. So this is the SVN. In the SVN copy, we actually include all of the unit tests as well. And in this obviously won't ship with that. In underscore data installer packages, we have an example of all of the new extension types. As I mentioned previously, you can now install packages, you can install libraries and things like that. Talk about that in a bit. So for a component, a language file would just look exactly like a normal language folder. It's language/code language file. And that makes it, I can tell you, a heck of a lot easier to work on when it's like that. The other thing is, if you have, say, 10 languages that your extension is translated into, if they're in the core language file, if they're in the core area, somebody deletes that language, those language files will be deleted. These ones are safe from people deleting individual language files. So if you had French in here, if somebody deletes the core French language pack, your French files are still safe for when they reinstall French back into the site or something like that. So yeah, again, that's just another thing to look at is these are example extensions which theoretically do install. If they don't, then we need to fix them. But those are the examples you should be looking at least to get things installed. Okay. So language file has a PHP file that can be included with its own API, and that API is used to support pluralization. We do that now. We do that properly now. It might sound really simple, but 0, 1 and more than 1 are not the only cases. In some of the Cyrillic languages, you have factors of 5, factors of 10, and over certain other numbers have different sort of pluralization. So we needed to actually create an API. It's opt-in. There's no extra load for like sort of common English rules. But some languages have slightly different 0 rules and that sort of thing. So wherever we deal with one item has been published, 2 items has been published, we were using a shortcut with putting brackets around the S. It cuts it. You can work in English, but it just doesn't translate properly. So we've put in a proper pluralization function. So I'd encourage you, when you're dealing with plural strings, to use that API, and how that manifests. If I can remember where they are. That's not going to work. No, it's not. Oh, is that front end? That's back end. Okay, I'll have to do this the hard way. No, that's not it. Okay, I can't find it, but there's just a special way to have, you'll have 2 language strings, one for the plural case and one for the non-plural case, or you'll be able to, basically you add a special prefix. I'll have to research what that was. Can't for the life of me remember what it was. I think it's _0 and then _1. And that handles the different pluralization cases. Okay, there's transliteration support, and that handles the difference between ASCII and Unicode slugs. I must profess I'm not an expert in that, so don't ask me too many questions about that. But suffice to say that the people that need it, that support's there now. There's also API to ignore search words per language. And a minimum search word length, because in, say, the simplified Chinese character set, one character is actually worth 1,000 words. So we had a hard-coded minimum there of 3, and it just didn't suit some languages. So that's there. There's custom language overrides. Probably not so much of an interest for you guys, but I'll just bring it to your attention. If you're developing sites and you're really not happy with the way the core is presenting, if you just want to change one string, something that's annoying you or make things a little bit friendlier for your client, you can hack the core language files, but then they get blown away potentially on an upgrade. What we've done is under language, you can put any file as an override. Sorry, it's one override per language, and in this file you would just override all the strings that you want. So that could be one string, it could be 1,000 strings. That will be helpful for any language where you just want to tune the thing. Can't this say organisation instead of title? And you can do that. And there's been a lot of work to make the strings also more contextual so that you can generally tell the difference between a title and an article and a title in somewhere else. I think that's right. So that's that. Okay, so the old .menu.ini file that we used to oops. Oh, just another little feature. You can log back into the page where you were. Sometimes that is good. Sometimes, if you're on a new item, if you're editing an item, it won't go back to that particular item. No, it'll be as if you're creating a new item because the session just loses the information. But anyway, that's a nice little trick. The .menu.ini used to translate all of the menu. We've changed that to .sys.ini, and it's also loaded at install time, so you can include some language strings to help with installation. I think that's right, Sam. Is it? .sys.ini. Yeah. Yep. Language switcher. Yeah, first session I mentioned that. It's enabled by the language filter plugin. You just turn it on or turn it off. What that does is sets up a variable in the application that just tells whether that's on. And in the back end, it's not so much of a problem, but in the front end, you just detect it via this the application. The plugin sets language filtering to true, and then a front end component would just interrogate the get language filter. And see an example of that if I can find it. Oops. Content. It'll be in the list model. GetLessQuery. Should be filter.lang. Is it up here? No. Got to do it the hard way again. I was in populate state. So in populate state, what we just do is we have a filter.language, and that will return something or nothing. So if nothing is in there, then we won't be filtering on language. But if the language filter is set, then you just put in a state, and then in GetLessQuery, wherever it was. This is only front end, mind you. If the language filter is set, where the language field is in either the current language tag or, it's a Boolean, in the current language tag or star. In this morning session, we looked at setting the languages. You could set content for all languages, or you could set content for an individual language code. All languages translates as star, so we look for those two. And that just all works. If you wanted to set up your own select filter itself, you'd have to take that into account for yourself. Okay. I'll just jump to access controls very quickly. For a thing to be controlled by permissions, it needs to be registered in the assets table. It sounds really complex, but it's not. That sort of logic is all built into JTable now. And as long as you have a field called asset_ID, then Joomla will just handle the assets and the permissions automatically for you. Handles it transparently. There's also form fields there's a rules widget which you just define. Now you can, I'd encourage you to use the core permissions as much as possible, but you can define your own permissions where the core ones just don't quite gel with where you want to take things. And something like that could be a forum where you want a moderation permission or something like that. And how that's set up is we have an access, just like the config XML, we have an access XML file. And this is for content, so we have 3 levels. We can set the permissions that are available to the component. We can set the permissions available for the category and for the article. So you can see here the article, we've dropped out the create. In the category, we've dropped out the admin and manage. And in the component level, we've dropped out the login permissions. Now, this is all up to you. You don't actually have to use the core permissions if you don't want to. But I'd sort of encourage you to follow that sort of paradigm because everybody's going to get used to using the core permissions. So this is where config gets your component. That modal component options, this is where that all happens from. And the widgets in the category and the article get that from here. And as I've said before, only the articles go down to the article level. The other ones stop at the category. So you have an example of how to do both. And I don't know that we've done an example of a content-related one that stops at the component, but certainly things like modules only stop at the component. In terms of leveraging that on the front end, the access control system has been trying to balance power to the user, simplicity to the user, power to the developer, simplicity to the developer. And so I'm sure we'll get some wish lists, but it'll be one of those things where is that going to tip the balance? Is it going to tip it out of balance too much? Again, we might have a look at featured. Oh no, we'll look at an article. Articles. So, in terms of lists, there is just a little thing you add to the query, but when you're looking at an individual item, because you know the ID, you'll actually use the authorize, the $user authorize methods. But in here, hopefully, filter.access should be the, yep. Oh no, Control K, Control K. There we go, okay. So we've made a determination that if we're filtering by access controls, and sometimes you might not want to from the front end, but we've made it configurable so that you can. All you do is grab the user object, call user authorized levels. So that will get the authorized access levels for the current user, and just say access in those groups. It's as simple as that. That used to be where access is less than user AID. It's not that much more complicated. follow all of the other procedure, and it just works. So I don't think we could have made it much easier than that. I'm pretty happy with where we've got that. All of your work is in setting up the back-end components to deal with this. The front end is actually really easy. Where it does get a little bit complicated though is at the article level, because you have to make a decision about, okay, if I can't see an article, do I bounce them? Do I have an option to display a teaser? You know, what do I do? Do I throw a 404 not found? That's something you've got to really deal with, determine what you want to do. You might want to throw a 500. You cannot edit this article. That might be a hard error, it might be a warning, might be a notice. I don't know, it's really up to you. But how do you do that? If I can remember where we do it. Do we do it in here? No, might be in the model. Get item, access.view. Okay, so what we've done here is if we're doing filter.access is a setting in the model where we tell can't remember where that's set. And again, what we're doing here is getting the authorized user levels. And then if the article is not in a category, we just use the default settings. If the article is in a category, we check the permissions of both the level of the item, the article itself, and we check the access level of the category, whichever one wins. One might have a deny. And then the view will just determine how you handle if I can't have a view. If I don't have access to view this at the item level, you have to make a decision on how you're going to handle that. It's really up to you. The point is you've got the information there and you can do what you like with it. Okay, so that's front-end access controls. Okay, very quickly, there's a lot of new events. A lot of events have been renamed. The reason we've renamed is we've changed the order, or we've introduced a new first argument to almost all the plugins for a context. So on content after save, the first argument is now what type of content you're saving. It might be content.article. And so if we kept the existing names, then it potentially would have led to horrible errors occurring. We've changed the names. It does mean the old plugin names won't work, but at least they'll die gracefully rather than dying spectacularly. So what we've done is done a couple of different namespaces. All the plugins related to content are now called on content, prefixed with on content. Anything to do with extensions, on extension. Anything to do with user is on user. So new events on before render is a new one, handy for some situations. Before and after delete of content. I'll have all this available for people to sometime. I haven't finished this yet, so but don't be too worried about writing it down. When you're changing state, there's a trigger for change state. There's also triggers for when an extension before and after an extension installs, updates and uninstalls, and a whole host of renamed extensions. Quickly cover, okay, so the last thing I just want to cover very quickly is new toys that you've got in the installation. You can now install libraries. The XML manifest must be a type of library. You can only install libraries in the subfolder. In a subfolder, you can't install new library files in the root/libraries. But you can extend existing parts of existing libraries. So you could add an Oracle database connector or some new model, extended model file. So that should be rather interesting. Google's Maps library, whatever. You can also you can do multi-installer packages. Basically, it's just a zip of zips, and you have a XML manifest of all of the different extensions that you're installing, and then each of those has its own manifest of how it installs. Should get you around some of the interesting workarounds we've had to deal with in 1.5 to get that to work. There is best thing to do is look at these example installer packages. Not that one. There's some new, the installer script can now have a class with several different methods in it that happen at different times. We've got install, uninstall, update, pre-flight, and post-flight. These are different. These aren't plugins. This is actually a class that's happening during the install or during upgrade. And of course, everyone is using method equals upgrade in their extensions, I hope. But these are pre-flight runs before any files are extracted, so it just allows you to maybe do some secondary processing on the zip that Joomla isn't aware of, version checks, compatibility checks, things like that. Probably need to check this with you, Sam. Install and update run after the database scripts are executed. Okay, that's good. If the extension is new, obviously the install method is run. If the extension exists, then the update method is run, but only if you have method equals update in the root tag, method equals upgrade in the root tag. Otherwise, the extension assumes that you aren't supposed to upgrade this, you're supposed to uninstall it. There might be a need for that. Post-flight runs after the extension is registered in the database and it's after everything else has happened, and you can do whatever you want in that area. Obviously, it's not run for uninstall because there's nothing else left to do. Discover, as I mentioned this morning, it's just an easy way to find extensions that haven't been registered in the system. It doesn't do any local file copying, it only works with the files that are actually there, and only performs the pre-flight, install and post-flight operations. And the developer, if the developer needs to copy their language files to the core area, they have to do that themselves. As I've said, you're not going to do that anymore because your custom extensions are going to have languages in the component or in the extension file. Actually, I do that in 1.5 now and just manually load them. I've got a couple of tricks for getting modules to translate. We can talk about that another day. Okay, more information will come later, but there is the ability for you to publish an XML file on your own site that can be registered in Joomla, and Joomla can look at that to see if you've got the most up-to-date version. As I said, more on that later, but that will be a really good, cool feature. A couple of changes to the XML manifest. Must be install tag is deprecated, you must use extension. There's a new update tag. You've got install and uninstall. Update allows you to define schemas and schema paths to do some manipulation during an update, not just install or uninstall, install using adding tables. update, modifying tables, uninstall, deleting tables. Again, look at the examples in the testing area. We've already covered params need to be changed to fields, J parameters being deprecated. Plugins now in folders, just like modules, just like components. They're not hanging off the root of whatever group they're in. So change your plugins, please. Yes, future support for rollback eventually. Okay, translation. Okay, and that's really it. I cannot possibly cover the implications of all those changes in 2 hours, 90 minutes. But there are a few key things there that you have to worry about, mainly the XML format, a few name changes here and there, to get your extensions running. The next thing you have to come to terms with is people are going to start getting used to the access controls in content, in the other components, and they're going to expect you to follow suit as well. If they find that your component is going to be subject to some of the access controls, but manage and admin, that sort of thing. If you're not providing it in your content, your categories as well, and we've made it pretty easy to do that, then people are going to start jumping up and down and ask you to do it. So, in terms of what do I do with supporting 1.5 and 1.6, this is really a difficult decision you're going to have to make because 1.6 is really rich in the things that you can now do and access control. I personally don't believe it's going to be easy to do a unified 1.5 plus 1.6 version of your software. You'll be able to get around the XML formats by putting in both a params and a fields set so that your component options are going to work. But somewhere along the way, you're going to have to make a decision. Do I dumb down my 1.6 version so that it only runs what used to be available on 1.5? Or do I rip a whole lot of code out of 1.6 and put it into my 1.5 extension to try and bolster the support, knowing that I'm never going to get anywhere close to the access control systems that I have available at 1.6. We've been warning you for a while, this change is coming. No legacy mode. Everything is backwards compatible to the previous version, but it's not going to be as much of a stretcher as legacy mode was. I would probably be seriously thinking about you need to support 2 versions. You need to finish off your roadmaps for 1.5, depending on what your customers need. You need to look seriously when the beta comes out at tooling up with all of these changes. And I would suggest you're going to be cutting different 1.6 trees. Use it as an opportunity to fix all those rainy day jobs that you never get around to because it's too hard and you don't want to break the 1.5 version. Well, we're going to break a few things, not too bad, but it could have been worse. Use it to improve things. Really digest the new MVC stuff. It will cut down your code a little bit. Find things that are wrong, find things that you can improve, feed them back to us as well. And then we'll get that into 1.7. The leap from 1.6 to 1.7 is, I predict, not going to be nearly as bad as the leap that we have now. 6 months releases, we can't do too much damage, can we? Maybe we can. But in 6 month release cycles where the upgrade processes aren't going to be as onerous, and certainly we'll learn a lot from the upgrade process from 1.5 to 1.6 that we will nail a lot of things. As for the uptake of 1.6 itself, I can't predict what that will be. I would imagine it'll be slow, probably slower than 1.5 because the legacy layer isn't going to let extensions run in 1.5, 1.0s would pretty much run natively. 1.5s are not going to run natively in 1.6, so you're going to need to do a little bit of work to do that. I think the uptake of 1.6 is a lot slower. Having said that, I encourage you to get up to 1.6 standard, because the quicker we get rid of 1.5 and the shackles that are on us there, the better it's, 1.5 is going to become our IE6, really. But when 1.6 goes GA, 1.5 is going to be officially maintained, albeit in a lesser maintenance mode, for 12 months. So you're going to have to deal with what you do with that. It does mean the customers can potentially even skip 1.6. 1.7 could be due out, late November, sometime in January. So a lot of things to take into account. But since we're going to timed releases, it gives you a lot better confidence. You've got confidence the release is going to come out, allows you to plan your roadmaps around the Joomla releases. This first one of 1.7 is going to be a bit funny because we're really on the edge of when is December going to be relative to when GA comes out. And we will probably adjust the time frame either a little bit before, make it slightly shorter, or make it slightly longer. So it kicks us in and misses that horrible last 2 weeks of December, first 2 weeks of January, which nothing ever happens around then. Although we seem to release Mambo around Christmas for some reason. And just before long weekends, anyway. So, yeah, apologise, fairly dry talk, and appreciate a little bit mind-numbing as well. But there's a lot of richness there. Would love to see you on the development lists, in the IRC chats to help us deal with beta. Beta's going to need a lot of work to stabilise. We're probably going to have missed a few things, but join in the community. The bug squad is going to be the best place to tool up in 1.6 because we're going to have several experts available more often than not, more often than usual, to help people to tool the bug squad physically up in what the changes are. And you're going to learn a heck of a lot just by trying to work out why your things are breaking. But we need the third-party community to come on board as well to help us work out what we've missed. And just as there's things that we've forgotten in the UI that need to come back in, we've broken things unexpectedly in the API as well. So thanks for your attention. Thanks for your patience and keeping awake. And I'm pretty excited about this release and very excited about what you guys are going to do with 1.6. Thanks. Anyone got any energy for questions? It was a bit of a feel, I've had too much dessert. Yeah.
And I've been...
Yeah, go for it.
MVC, but supporting an existing website, so diving in deep even there, but not the breadth that you've illustrated today, which has been good to see what's there. But so I've discovered framework.joomla.org, is it? Which
using there was an API.
Yeah, and there's a URL of framework in there.
It could be, if it is not.
I thought it was part of Joomla.org.
There was an API.
And it's got all the classes listed, but most of them are red because you click on them and they say...
it could be. If it is, it might be a long lost site. But.
I thought it was somewhere that...
I'll have a look.
API sent me there.
Might be API. Yeah, we'll be moving this as the 1.5. I should mention developer.joomla.org. Terribly neglected over the last year or more. Thanks for coming, really appreciate it. We're giving that a reboot. It will have a knowledge base, it will have a lot of the continuous integration information. It's going to have the API information. So it's basically, at the first level, it's the hub of your universe to find out what a third-party developer needs, Then when you want to go to the next level and want to contribute, it's got the information about that as well. Yeah. Well, it's currently developer.joomla.org, but that's extremely old. We haven't been able to update. We haven't been updating that. This thing called beta happened, which has distracted us a little bit. But once that's out, we'll have some time to do there. So that'll show continuous integration. That's the unit tests. Unit tests are tests that test the actual PHP. Functional tests are a thing where you go through Firefox, basically record your actions and your clicks. You get an expected output, and you're able to replay those. And each time somebody commits, we'll retest the unit tests, and I think the functional tests will be done once or a couple of times a day, and we'll be able to see who breaks stuff when it happens. I haven't broken anything in the last 24 hours. So that'll be really good, and because some people's local systems can't be geared up for the unit testing, and the functional testings are a little bit more complex to set up. So I believe. So that will be good from a developer point of view if you're contributing and that sort of stuff. Also, what's coming with developer.joomla.org will be essentially the equivalent of the wiki for the developer in terms of code. We'll be setting up a new repository which will hold the trunk, the core code. Trunk will be locked down to certain trusted committers, obviously, as will certain releases. But otherwise, you'll be able to open slather, create your own branch, and do whatever you want to improve Joomla. You'll also have your own sandpit, and there will be probably an area for incubator projects of really cool things that people want to work together on. My pet favourite is going to be like an extensions generator. There's a few guys in the community that have each rolled their own. I've rolled my own. Met another guy in New York that's rolled his own, and we might work on that communally. And it might become a sort of this quasi-official thing that rolls from generation to generation, but it won't go in the core distribution. And then you'll have your own sandpit. And the interesting thing about it is everybody will have right access to everybody else's work. So you might find somebody's fixed that bug fix. Who was that? And improve your own work. Obviously, if you want your space respected, just let people know. But it will be much easier. At the moment, you've got to sort of contact us to get a branch. A branch is certainly a lot easier to get now than it was a year ago. You can work on your own things there. So that's all a part of the revamping of the developer community, trying to get a little bit that camaraderie back in, that communal work, and but still allowing people to work on their own. If you want to work on your own controlled environment, Joomla code's still there. We probably be looking at a more streamlined system for bug tracking and that sort of stuff as well to help the bug squad out. And that. So, but lots of plans. Unfortunately, not enough hours in the day to do it, and our attention is just completely on beta and obviously this new process that we're about to go into. So. Okay, so we should probably think about wrapping up. Thank you. So, good day? Okay, that's good. Hopefully the people overseas like it too.